Welcome to our deep dive into the lean startup methodology. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all about building a business that thrives, and it's not just for tech companies. It's really about testing any big idea without, you know, betting the farm, right? Luckily, I've got an expert here with us today to kind of unpack it all.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to explore how these principles can be applied across industries
Yeah.
and different company sizes. And we'll even see how giants like Intuit and HP
Hmm.
have used this approach successfully.
Awesome. So let's start with IMVU. Remember them. They wanted to kind of revolutionize instant messaging with 3D avatars. This was back in 2004. Sounds like a cool idea in theory, right? But it totally flopped initially.
Yeah, it's really interesting because IMVU's plan looked great on paper. They had a massive potential market
Mm.
with strong network effects, but they just assumed they knew what customers wanted without actually testing their hypotheses.
So they spent months building this incredible tech, but they forgot to ask the most important question: will anyone actually use this? Turns out their target audience didn't even know what an IM add-on was.
Exactly. This is where validated learning comes in. It's not about blindly following some plan. It's about constantly testing assumptions and gathering evidence to see if you're on the right track. IMVU had to make some pretty drastic changes, pivoting from an add-on to a standalone IM network.
And get this, they discovered that users weren't really that interested in chatting with existing friends. They wanted to use avatars to make new friends online. It's a classic example of how customer feedback can completely reshape your vision. They went from struggling to make like $300 a month to being used by millions of users.
Yeah, and this pivot really highlights a crucial point. Your initial vision might need to be adjusted based on what you learn from your customers. IMVU's story is a perfect example of the build, measure, learn feedback loop.
Okay, so you build a minimum viable product, or MVP, which is like the simpling version of your product,
Mhm.
to test your key assumptions. And then you measure how customers actually respond to it. And then you learn from that data to decide whether to persevere or pivot.
Right, and remember, an MVP is not about launching some low-quality product. It's about learning about your customers' needs as quickly as possible. Think about Zappos. They didn't start with this huge shoe empire, right? Their MVP was just a simple website with photos of shoes from local stores, just to see if people would buy shoes online.
That's a really good point. And then there's Groupon. They started with handmade PDFs,
Hmm.
offering 2-for-1 pizzas. No fancy website, no marketing, just pure customer interest testing. But I'm curious, how did they measure that interest? Was it PDF downloads or coupon redemptions or something else? What specific learning milestones were they looking for?
That's a great question. Groupon actually focused on tracking coupon redemptions
Yeah.
and customer feedback to kind of gauge interest. Their learning milestone was to see a consistent increase in those redemptions and positive feedback, which signaled that there was real demand for their service. This early validation allowed them to scale up really quickly and ultimately led to a billion-dollar business.
That's incredible. It's amazing how a simple experiment like that can reveal so much. Speaking of large-scale operations, Intuit, the company behind TurboTax and QuickBooks. They're a fascinating case study of applying the lean startup methodology within a large organization.
It's interesting because you wouldn't typically associate a huge company like that with the need to, get lean. But Intuit faced these challenges with continuous innovation. Their traditional product development process was really slow and inefficient. So they decided to embrace lean startup principles
Mm.
and created this innovation sandbox where teams could experiment like a startup.
Oh, wow. So they started running hundreds of experiments every year, from new product features to different marketing campaigns. One successful experiment led to the creation of SnapTax, which is the app that lets you file your taxes from your phone. But what's really interesting to me is, how did Intuit actually measure progress in this world of constant experimentation? Did they fall into the trap of vanity metrics? Or were they focusing on actionable metrics tied to customer behavior?
That's a crucial point. Intuit recognized the danger of vanity metrics, and they focus specifically on actionable metrics tied to customer behavior, like user engagement, task completion rates within the app,
Ah.
and ultimately successful tax filings. They understood that real progress is about delivering value to the customer, not just chasing these fleeting numbers.
So it's not just about building a product, it's about building a system for learning and adapting. And that brings us to, I think, a really key concept: pivoting.
Yeah. Pivoting can be challenging, especially when you've already achieved some level of success. It's tempting to stick with what seems to be working, even when data might be suggesting that you need to make a change. Let's look at Vodafone, a company that was aiming to revolutionize civic engagement. They provide a really compelling case study of using data to drive pivot decisions.
Vodafone's founder, David Benetti, he was determined to avoid those past mistakes and really fully embrace the lean startup methodology. So he ran multiple experiments over 12 months, pivoting several times along the way. They began with a social network for verified voters. Sounds promising, right?
It does, yeah. But their initial MVP actually exposed some pretty major flaws in their growth model. User retention was low, and the referral rate was dismal.
Yeah, but here's the silver lining. They caught these issues early on, thanks to their focus on those actionable metrics. Instead of being blinded by vanity metrics like, the number of registered users, they were tracking actual engagement and user behavior.
Yeah, Vodafone actually went through several pivots. They tested a tool to help voters contact their elected officials, and they even experimented with this self-serve platform where anyone could connect with verified voters. Each pivot was really driven by data, not gut feelings. They were constantly testing assumptions, learning, and refining their strategy.
Wow, it's fascinating how they accelerated that MVP process with each experiment, becoming faster and more efficient, thanks to all of that accumulated learning. Vodafone's story really embodies the lean startup spirit. It's not about nailing it on the first try, but about adapting quickly based on what you learn. But pivoting like that can be scary, especially when you've tasted some success, right? It's so tempting to just stick with what seems to be working, even if the data suggests otherwise.
That's where the discipline of innovation accounting comes in. It helps you cut through that emotional attachment and make more objective decisions. Based on evidence, this actually reminds me of Path, the social networking app. Founded by some pretty big names in Silicon Valley, they launched with these really high expectations and generated a lot of initial hype.
But their MVP received kind of mixed reviews. Some people loved it, some people weren't so sure.
Right, but instead of just stubbornly clinging to their original vision, they actually listened to the feedback, made changes, and iterated based on what they learned. They understood that pivoting isn't a failure. It's a sign of adaptability and commitment to building a sustainable business. Another company that comes to mind is Wealthfront. They're known for their automated investment services. But they had a rather unexpected beginning, an online game for amateur investors called Kaching.
Kaching was actually designed to disrupt the financial industry by identifying talented amateur investors and challenging those professional fund managers. It was a clever way to gather data and test assumptions.
It was, yeah. However, their experiments revealed some limitations with this approach. Their real opportunity actually lay in using technology to make sophisticated financial advice accessible to everyone. So they made a bold move, pivoting from a fantasy investing game to a technology-driven financial advisory platform.
So that pivot involved some significant changes to their product, their target audience, and their entire business model. But it turned out to be a successful move, transforming Wealthfront into a leading innovator in fintech. It really underscores that pivots can take many forms. Sometimes you change your customer segment, sometimes you change your technology, sometimes you change your entire value proposition.
Right, and the Lean Startup Framework provides the structured approach to navigating these complex decisions, ensuring that you're constantly learning and adapting to find the right path for your business. Now we've discussed validated learning, building MVPs, and even pivoting. But to build a truly adaptable organization, one that can respond to change quickly, we need to talk about small batches.
Small batches. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that look like in practice, especially in the startup world?
Think of it this way. Imagine you're assembling a bunch of mass mailings. You could fold all the letters first, then seal all the envelopes, and then stick on all the stamps. Or you could complete one envelope from start to finish before moving on to the next one. That's the power of small batches. It might seem a little counterintuitive, but it actually leads to faster learning and better quality.
I can see how this applies to software development. Instead of spending months building this huge feature, you break it down into smaller chunks, test each part with users, and gather feedback along the way.
Exactly. This approach was inspired by Toyota's lean manufacturing principles, and it allows you to spot and fix problems early on. You're not waiting until the very end of this long development cycle to find out that something's not working. It's like Toyota's famous Antezon cord. Any worker can pull this cord to stop the entire production line. If they see a defect, it might seem disruptive at first, but it allows for quick fixes and prevents these much bigger problems later on.
That's a fantastic analogy. So small batches help build this culture of continuous improvement. It's constant testing, learning, and iterating, creating this feedback loop that drives quality and efficiency.
And in software, this translates to continuous deployment. You're not waiting for these big, infrequent releases. You're pushing out small updates regularly, sometimes even multiple times a day.
That's incredible. But it's not just about speed, is it? It's about creating a system that allows you to adapt to those changing customer needs.
Absolutely. Small batches let you experiment, test your assumptions, and pivot more easily if needed. You're not stuck in this long development cycle. That makes it difficult to change course.
This is like a whole new way of thinking about product development. It's about embracing experimentation and learning as you go, rather than this like meticulous upfront planning.
Exactly. Let's take Alphabet Energy, for example. They're a company developing technology to generate electricity from waste heat. They created this process to go from product concept to a physical prototype in just 6 weeks.
6 weeks. That's remarkable. How do they manage that?
They use small batches throughout their entire process. Instead of building these massive, expensive prototypes, they create smaller, iterative versions, testing every step of the way. This allows them to experiment with different materials, designs, and configurations, quickly identifying what works and what doesn't.
So they're not just building a product, they're building a system for learning and adaptation.
Exactly. And this approach isn't just limited to physical products. Think about education. Imagine a tool like School of One, which personalizes learning for each student. Teachers can experiment with different teaching methods and curriculums in small batches, seeing what works best for each student.
That's a game changer. It takes personalized learning to a whole new level. But there's got to be a potential pitfall with small batches, right? Like, how do you overcome that traditional mindset of large batch efficiency? Many companies, especially these established ones, are accustomed to working in silos and passing work in these large chunks.
Yeah, that's a really common challenge. This traditional approach often leads to delays, miscommunication, and a lack of feedback. By the time a product actually reaches customers, it might be too late to make significant changes. To kind of combat this, we could leverage the concept of hypothesis pull.
Hypothesis pull. Okay, that sounds intriguing. How does that work?
So instead of pushing work through a system based on some predetermined plan, right?
Yeah.
You actually pull work based on your learning needs. You identify the riskiest assumptions in your business model, and then you design experiments to test them.
So instead of asking, can we build this, you're asking, should we build this, and will anyone actually use it?
Exactly. Think back to Alphabet Energy. They aren't just building thermoelectric devices, they're constantly testing and refining their assumptions about which markets are most promising, which applications offer the best ROI, and what features customers truly value.
So they're pulling work through their development process based on learning needs, not some rigid roadmap. That's a powerful shift in perspective. Okay, so we've covered small batches, continuous deployment, and hypothesis pull. It's all coming together. But how do we actually cultivate a culture that embraces this experimental, adaptable way of working?
One really effective tool is the 5 whys analysis. It's a pretty simple technique for getting to the root cause of a problem. Instead of just addressing the symptom, you keep asking why until you uncover the underlying issue.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, getting to the heart of the matter. Can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's say you're a software company and you're experiencing a server outage. That's disrupting customer service. You can just reboot the server and move on. But the 5 whys approach encourages you to investigate a little deeper.
Okay, so let's try it. Why did the server fail?
Let's say it failed because a critical software update wasn't properly tested.
Okay, why wasn't it tested?
Perhaps the engineer was rushing to meet a deadline.
Okay, why was he rushing?
Because the project was behind schedule.
Okay, why was it behind schedule?
Maybe the initial scope was just overly ambitious.
And why was the scope so ambitious?
Maybe the team didn't properly break down the project into smaller, more manageable tasks.
Wow, so what seemed like a technical issue, a server outage, was actually rooted in this deeper organizational problem, a lack of focus on those small batches. And iterative development, that's a real eye-opener.
Yeah, the 5 whys process can really help uncover those hidden patterns and address systemic issues that are contributing to problems. It's about fostering a culture of learning and continuous improvement.
It's not just about finding the root cause, though, is it? It's also about making sure you're investing proportionally in prevention. Like, minor issues, require minor adjustments, but recurring problems really need more time and resources to find those lasting solutions.
Right. Companies like IGN Entertainment have actually used the 5 whys analysis to completely transform their culture. They've created this system where anyone can initiate a 5 whys session, bringing together a cross-functional team to investigate problems and identify solutions.
It's about empowering everyone in the organization to be problem solvers and agents of change. This all kind of ties back to Intuit's journey with QuickBooks. They were really struggling to innovate within their established product line. Their traditional waterfall development process was just too slow and cumbersome.
Yeah, they recognized the need for a more agile, experimental environment. So they took this pretty radical step and tossed out their old processes, embracing this more iterative approach, even if it meant starting the year without a defined roadmap.
So they held these idea code solution jams, bringing together engineers,
Right.
product managers, and even customers to brainstorm ideas and experiment. And they invested heavily in new technologies and processes. That allowed them to work in smaller batches, get feedback from customers more quickly, and iterate their product based on what they learned.
The results were pretty impressive. Customer satisfaction soared, sales increased. And Intuit really demonstrated that even a large, established company can successfully embrace those lean startup principles.
It highlights that innovation isn't just a one-time event. It's this ongoing process that demands constant experimentation, learning, and adaptation. But managing that state of constant change can be challenging, especially as a startup grows, right? You have to balance operational excellence with disruptive innovation.
Yeah, it's like juggling. Think of it as keeping multiple balls in the air, each representing a different type of work.
Okay, I'm picturing this juggling act. What are these different balls that companies need to keep in motion?
So first you have the sustaining innovation ball. This is about improving existing products and services, making them better, faster, and cheaper. It's really essential for staying competitive and keeping your current customers happy.
You can't just rest on your laurels, right? You need to constantly iterate and improve to stay ahead.
Exactly. Then there's the efficiency innovation ball. This focuses on optimizing your internal processes, streamlining operations, and reducing waste. It's about making your company more efficient and profitable.
This is where those principles of lean manufacturing really shine, identifying and eliminating bottlenecks, improving workflows, and creating that culture of continuous improvement.
And finally, the most exciting ball, disruptive innovation. This is about creating entirely new products, services, or business models that really challenge the status quo and have the potential to transform entire industries.
This is where those big leaps forward happen, the game changers that redefine the market. Think of companies like Uber, Airbnb, or Netflix. They disrupted their industries and created entirely new categories.
Yeah, and the challenge is that these three types of innovation often require different mindsets, skill sets, and even organizational structures. What works for sustaining innovation might not be suitable for disruptive innovation.
It's like trying to fit square pegs into round holes. You need to create an environment where each type of innovation can thrive.
Right. That's where the concept of an innovation sandbox comes in. It's this protected space where teams can experiment, take risks, and operate with a different set of rules.
It's like giving these teams a safe haven, a playground, where they can try new things without fear of failure or interference.
Exactly. This sandbox allows them to operate more like a startup, focusing on speed, agility, and validated learning.
But how do you prevent those innovation teams from becoming isolated or disconnected from the core business? There needs to be some mechanism for reintegration, bringing those successful innovations back into the fold.
You're absolutely right. The sandbox isn't meant to be permanent. It's a launching pad for these disruptive ideas.
Yeah.
When an innovation shows promise, it needs to be integrated back into the parent organization, where it can access more resources, scale up, and reach a wider audience.
It's a delicate balance. You need enough autonomy for experimentation, but you also have to ensure that successful innovations can be seamlessly woven back into the company's fabric.
Intuit's creation of SnapTax is a great example of this approach. They gave the SnapTax team the freedom to operate within that innovation sandbox, away from the constraints of their traditional product development processes.
And when SnapTax proved to be successful, they integrated it back into the core business, providing the support and resources it needed to flourish.
Creating an innovation sandbox is just one piece of the puzzle, though. You also need to cultivate a management portfolio. That allows you to effectively juggle these different types of innovation.
So what does a well-balanced innovation portfolio look like?
It's about strategically allocating resources and balancing your investments across sustaining innovation, efficiency innovation, and disruptive innovation. You can't put all your eggs in one basket.
You got to diversify your innovation bets, hedging against the uncertainty of the future.
Exactly. And it's not just about money. It's about talent, time, and attention. You need the right people working on the right projects, aligned with your overall strategic goals.
It sounds like you need a team of expert jugglers to keep all these balls in the air.
It definitely requires a high level of organizational agility and a culture that really embraces experimentation and learning. And here's a crucial point. Successful innovation often involves letting go. As a product or service matures, it might need different leadership and different processes. The innovator who launched the initial MVP might not be the best person to lead it through its next phase of growth.
So it's about recognizing when to pass the baton, allowing new leaders and teams to step in and take the innovation to the next level.
Absolutely. And no matter how well you manage your innovation portfolio, there will always be resistance to change. People are naturally drawn to the familiar. Even those who initially embrace those lean startup principles might find themselves clinging to the status quo as the company grows.
It's the classic innovator's dilemma. Success can breed complacency, making it harder to embrace new ideas and challenge those existing paradigms.
Exactly. That's why it's so vital to continuously reinforce the values of experimentation, learning, and adaptation. It's about creating a culture that celebrates both successes and failures, viewing them as opportunities for growth.
So it's not just about implementing tools or techniques, it's about fostering a mindset of continuous innovation, a willingness to challenge assumptions and adapt to changing circumstances. The lean startup is a journey, not a destination.
You summed it up perfectly. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. The lean startup isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a framework for thinking about building a successful business in the face of uncertainty.
It's about asking the right questions, testing your assumptions, and constantly iterating based on what you learn. It's about embracing that journey of discovery, knowing that the path to success is rarely a straight line.
Right. No matter your industry or the stage of your business, the principles of the lean startup can help you build something truly remarkable.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on this deep dive into the world of lean startups. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and are ready to embark on your own innovation journey. Keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep building.